Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. I do hope you're doing marvellously well. I'm doing great, thank you very much, and I'm so delighted that you've joined me this evening, and thank you so very much for those of you who support my channel by getting me a cup of coffee. I so appreciate it. Every bit is very, very helpful. Thank you very much indeed. But before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Click the notification bell and the thumbs up. And let's continue with part 3 of our story tonight. The following morning, Samantha was very glad to see that her husband Braden was in a better mood. He'd gone to the woodgrove with his dogs for a walk to reassure himself that it didn't feel as sinister as it had done the day before. And he'd promptly returned to the house before breakfast, claiming he had not experienced anything peculiar in the woodgrove at all. And the dogs had not behaved strangely, and all the steers were in very good form. "Well, I told you, love," said Samantha. "I don't know what happened to you in the woodgrove yesterday, but put it behind you now. You know they say that lightning never strikes in the same place twice." If Samantha had hoped her daughter Carla would be in a better mood, it was not to be. When she asked Carla if she was going over to Eleanor's house to spend some time with her best friend, which was something she routinely did, especially when it was the school holidays, Carla just glared at her mother and said, "I told you, I'm not talking to Eleanor." "But why ever not, love? She's a good friend of yours, your very best friend. And even if you don't see her today, you'll be seeing her this Sunday when we go to the Russos for a barbecue. You can't keep avoiding her like this, just because of her cousin." "Mum, if she's going to cosy up with her obnoxious cousin, I want absolutely nothing to do with her," said Carla. "She's been treacherous, and she's made it clear whose side she's on." "That is not fair, love. You're the one that's pushing Eleanor away, simply because her cousin threw your doll into our lake all those years ago. I'm embarrassed by how immature you're being over this. I don't know what's got into you of late." "I don't need to listen to you harping on like this, Mother. I'm going for a walk. I need some fresh air and light exercise." Samantha Kushner watched her daughter marching off to the woods rather defiantly. Normally Carla would take the woods as a shortcut to get to the Russo property to spend some quality time with Eleanor, but obviously not today. She was going for a casual stroll all on her own, and Samantha reasoned to herself that the walk would do her daughter a whole lot of good. She hated to see Carla pushing Eleanor away like this, but she hoped that in time her daughter would finally come to her senses. She wondered how long Carla was going to carry on, being so belligerently pugnacious. You could never be sure with teenagers, but one thing was for certain: her daughter would end up being incredibly lonely over the school holidays if she shut Eleanor out like this. As Carla ventured into the woodgrove, she was feeling angry, and did not understand why she was being so objectionably unreasonable. But she couldn't make sense of the own complexity of her emotions. She knew her mother was right, of course, that she was being desperately childish, and pathetic even, pushing Eleanor away like this for no really good reason, and getting so piqued about Paddy Russo moving on to the Russo ranch next door. But the thought of that horrible, horrible boy, who had meanly thrown her doll into the lake all those years ago, coming back into her life, was something that made her literally shudder. She didn't believe a boy like him could possibly change. He had been nasty back then, and he was probably nasty now, and yet everyone was making her feel as if she was the obstinate, unreasonable one here. But was she? Even her father had told her when she'd gone down to the kitchen for some coffee in the early hours of the morning that boys do change, and that she wasn't to worry because he was perfectly sure that Paddy Russo had grown into a very nice young man. "I was also a brat when I was 7 years old," her father assured her. "I always played nasty tricks on my sister. Frankly, I'm surprised she forgave me for all of them." "But you're nothing like Paddy Russo, Daddy," Carla had said defiantly. "No one could be as nasty as he is." "Oh, sweetheart," her father had said, enveloping her in a warm hug. "I think when we go to the Russos for the barbecue on Sunday, and you meet Paddy Russo for yourself, you will see that he is nothing like the brat you so vividly remember." The woodgrove was so pretty that morning, the air fresh. The warm glaze of the golden sunshine slipped generously through the leafy boughs of the trees, like an all-embracing affectionate hug. And it was during this walk that Carla's mood lifted exponentially, as she had always been drawn to nature. And the squirrels that dived from one tree branch to the next made her giggle, for nature does indeed have a wonderful sense of humour. Carla made sure she took the path through the trees that led to the road on the other side of their ranch, for she didn't want to go anywhere near the Rousseau property if she could possibly help it. All of a sudden it occurred to her that the woodgrove had grown pretentiously quiet. Direfully gloomy, it would seem. All the bird-song had suddenly dissipated. "What the hell?" she thought, glancing around herself rather nervously. She had played in this woodgrove all her life, but she had never known it to feel this inauspicious before. She began twitching rather nervously, like a frightened rabbit that believes a predator is in its midst. "I need to get out of here," she thought. "I do need to get out of here. Something feels desperately wrong about the woodgrove right now." It was like she could sense an iniquitous evil, which was an experience she had never felt before, among this labyrinth of magnificent old-growth trees that she had always regarded as her good friends. But now even they seemed to be menacing, like a crowd of tall, lofty strangers that was ganging up against her. It was almost as if there were eyes absolutely everywhere, and someone or something was clandestinely watching her from the dark shadows. But when she studied the woodgrove intently, she saw no visible sign of a single solitary soul. But it was so cloyingly quiet, disturbingly so, and she felt as if the whole woodgrove was closing in on her in a suffocating way, almost as if any moment the ground beneath her would swallow her alive. The panic inside her became overwhelming. Her throat tightened and constricted, and her breath was cruelly obstructed. She wanted to run, rarely she did, but it was almost as if her legs were rooted towards the ground, like a burgeoning root that could not be pulled away from its secure anchor. It was then that Carla smelt the vile stench. It was abominable, so much so she felt sick to her stomach. For death and decay was in the air, and it burnt her eyes and the back of her throat like a savage acidic chemical that was making her feel as if she wanted to hurl up the contents of her stomach. It was when she heard her father's voice. Relief washed over her, like a reassuring warm shower on an icy cold day. "Carla, is that you? Where are you, Carla?" And then she saw her father, standing there only several feet away from her. She was about to run towards him, but something made her stop in her tracks. Her father was standing there larger than life, wearing the same red plaid shirt and cowboy boots he had been wearing in the morning. But one side of his body seemed almost translucent and ghost-like, almost like a holographic projection that has become somewhat distorted, which made Carla realize that what she was seeing was not real. In that moment Carla knew something wasn't right. This man standing before her, claiming to be her father, was not him. There was no way it was her father. And even the unpalatable way he was smiling at her was not remotely normal. Indeed, his smile seemed insidiously evil, if that was at all possible. Carla's father stood there continually calling her name. "Carla, come here. You look frightened. Are you all right?" But even as those words were uttered from his mouth, they lacked the genuine concern and loving energy of the way her father would normally speak to her, with his very gentle devotion. "Go away! You are not my father!" Carla cried out. "I don't know who you're pretending to be, but you're not my dad, and you don't fool me for a second. Get away from me!" In a trice, the entity that was trying to impersonate her father looked down upon himself and realized that the insidious trick of his holographic projection had failed to work effectively. Suddenly, the holographic projection of Carla's father seemed to right itself, and for a brief moment, the man standing feet away from Carla looked exactly like her dad. "Come here, Carla. You look visibly upset. Of course I'm your father." "No, you're not. Get away from me," Carla cried out. "I don't know who or what you are, but you are not my dad." All of a sudden, the thing that had been cloaking itself by pretending to be Carla's father suddenly shape-shifted as if it could no longer hold her father's form. And then Carla was able to see what he really was. And she thought the ground would swallow her whole, because she'd never physically witnessed anything so malevolently evil in all her life. For standing before her was the most godlessly malignant beast that she'd ever seen. Indeed, in that moment, she couldn't believe what she was beholding could possibly be real. She wanted to believe this was a nightmare from which she would awaken, but she knew it was not. It felt as if she'd been thrown into hell for a brief second, for surely this was where this decrepit creature obviously belonged. It was, without doubt, the ugliest, most grotesque skeletal giant-like being that she'd ever seen. It was disfigured and very gaunt, with a mummified-looking face and an ash-coloured skin stretched so tightly across the body that the bones protruded unevenly, like jagged knives tearing through the flesh. The creature had sizable antlers on its head, like that of a deer, and some leafy green foliage appeared to be caught up in the right antler. The creature glared at Carla through its deep, hollow, sunken eyes that glowed like two red lights. It was waving around its long, spiky claws that were significantly longer than its crooked fingers, and its jaw was filled with razor-sharp, very crooked-looking yellowing teeth. The entity was staring at Carla and drooling like a dog does over a very big, juicy bone that it very much wants to eat. And in that moment, Carla was left in no doubt that this creature was salivating over her because it wanted to devour her. "Come here, Carla," it said tauntingly in her father's voice. "Come to your father." And then he began to cackle like a witch, almost as if he delighted in taunting Carla. When Carla realized the creature was now moving towards her, she let out a shrill, ear-piercing scream, and then she heard a young male voice say, "What the hell is that?" And then the couple of gunshots were fired at the beast. The sound was deafening. The grotesque entity charged away after the gunshots were fired, and that was when Carla found herself staring into the eyes of a young man who was probably round and about her own age. In his hands he was carrying a hunting rifle, and it was clear he'd fired the shots at the strange creature she had encountered. "Who are you?" she asked, unable to hide the deep suspicion in her voice, because at this precise moment her whole reality seemed to be conspiring against her, and she was struggling to discern what was real and what was not. "Wow, that's a nice way to greet someone who may just have potentially saved your life. I'm the one that fired my rifle at that ghastly thing. My name is Paddy Russo, by the way. I've moved in next door with the Russo family." "You saw it too?" asked Carla suddenly, realizing that she wasn't going completely mad, and that someone else had witnessed the horror and the monstrosity that she had just encountered. "Of course I saw it. My uncle's golden Labrador Mick Sheba was behaving very strangely around the woods a few minutes ago. Sheba was barking fiercely. He refused to follow me into the woods. And that dog, well, he's not normally afraid of anything. So that got my attention. I took my hunting rifle into the woods and came in here to investigate for myself. But I have no idea what that thing was. I only saw it for a couple of seconds or so. But that was enough, let me tell you. And I could sense it was very evil, like something you'd probably find in the bowels of hell. But it certainly wanted to prey on you. I could see the spittle coming out of its mouth. It was disgusting, and those eyes, I don't even want to think about them." "Well, I suppose I have to thank you for scaring that thing away. But I doubt your rifle would have hurt it. I think it could almost escape anything." "No need to thank me," said Paddy with a mischievous twinkle in his eyes. "I always like to rescue a damsel in distress. It was a pleasure to be of help to you." "That hideous thing shape-shifted into my dad, and spoke in my dad's voice. It was calling my name." At that, Carla could not help herself but burst into tears, which she wiped away in embarrassment, for she didn't want Paddy Russo to witness her crying like this, but she couldn't help herself, for she'd had such a terrible shock. "I was scared," she admitted. "If you hadn't come along and fired those shots, it might actually have got me." "Well, thankfully it did not. I dare say if we told anyone about what we saw, they wouldn't believe a word of it. I'm struggling to believe what I saw myself."
But how could it be like that? I don't understand. How could it know my name? How could it impersonate my father? If the thing's holographic projection hadn't failed, I might have believed it was my dad. Please tell me this was a horrible nightmare. I don't want to believe that this has just happened.
I wish I could tell you it was a nightmare from which you would awaken, but I'm sorry it wasn't. That thing was real. It was supernatural, I'm most sure. Something demonic. Sorry, forgive me for being so extremely rude. What is your name? You're not Eleanor's best friend, Carla Kushner, are you? I'm guessing you are, given the Woodgrove is only used by the two families, the Kushners and Russos. So I'm adding everything together and assuming you must be Carla.
I am she, said Carla lamely.
I thought you were her, said Paddy with a chuckle. Fancy running into you like this, under such bizarre circumstances. But I knew we'd run into each other soon enough, given you're Eleanor's best friend. I remember you from when we were 7, believe it or not.
Yes, I remember you too, said Carla scathingly. It's hard to forget the boy that murdered my doll by throwing it in the lake. It was a very horrible thing to do.
Oh, come on. You're not still upset about all that? Asked Paddy. That happened yonks ago. Eleanor was telling me you were upset about that incident, and telling me that I needed to apologize to you. I thought she was winding me up, having a joke at my expense. But it turns out she wasn't wrong. You're being deadly serious. You're very upset by what I did back then. I may remind you I was only 7 years old. I can't believe you're actually nursing a grudge against me. For all those years ago. It's a bit extreme, isn't it? He asked, studying Carla with an undeniable expression of amusement on his face that he was struggling to suppress.
Of course I'm upset about what you did back then. I'll never forget that horrible smirk on your face after you threw my doll into the lake. You wanted to make me upset, and congratulations to you because you succeeded.
But of course I wanted to make you upset. Why do you think I did it in the first place? Your horrified reaction was so very rewarding to me. I got great fun in winding you up. I always did. I wouldn't have taken your doll from you if you weren't so reactive. And by the looks of things, you haven't changed at all in that regard. I suppose I better watch myself so that I don't pull your chain again, because I think I might be tempted to do so, given that you react so well to everything.
I'm so glad you take great pleasure in causing me so much upset. And if you ever dare pull a stunt on me like that again, you will be sorry, and I mean it.
Paddy could not help himself but look amused. That's me getting a big telling off for misbehaving when I was 7 years old. I will try my best not to upset you again. He was looking at Carla curiously through his piercing blue eyes that made Carla suddenly go weak at the knees. She had only just realized that actually Eleanor was absolutely right, and that Paddy Russo had grown into a very handsome young man. He looked like a cowboy from the Wild West, and Carla had always liked the men on those Wild Western movies who were so virile and masculine in her opinion. How was it possible for that obnoxious little geek she had known as a 7-year-old girl had grown up to be such a heartthrob? It wasn't fair. Even so, Carla reasoned with herself that if Paddy's outer veneer was attractive, it didn't change a single thing. He was probably still as disagreeable as he'd always been as a young boy. A rotten apple didn't suddenly become perfectly fresh. Everybody knew that. For the record, said Paddy sincerely, I'm very sorry about your doll that I threw into the lake all those years ago. I'm also sorry for making fun out of you and smirking in the way that you claim I did. I was a brat back then, I do admit it. But I promise you I'm actually quite a nice guy underneath it all, even though I can see that that's extremely hard for you to actually believe.
I'm not sure I do believe you, said Carla suspiciously. You may have shot at that horrible thing we just encountered and scared it away. You may have come to my rescue, which I do appreciate, but it still does not make you a good person.
Fair enough. I understand where you're going with this, said Paddy. I can see that I'm going to have to prove to you in due course that you're wrong about me. Now come on. Would you like me to walk you back to your farmhouse to make sure you get home safely? After what you experienced, I wouldn't feel comfortable about you walking home alone.
I appreciate that. I would prefer not to go home alone. I'm scared about the Woodgrove now. I don't know if I'll ever feel the same way about it again, after encountering that thing. You don't think it's going to come back, do you? Asked Carla with an anguished look on her face.
I hope not, said Paddy. Come, let's go, shall we?
Once Paddy had walked Carla back to the farmhouse, she knew it would be extremely rude not to invite him in for a coffee before he went back to the Rousseau ranch. She had secretly hoped he'd refuse her offer, but instead he said that a coffee would be very nice, thank you very much. No one was more surprised to see Carla going into the kitchen with a young man at her side than Samantha Kushner herself, who realised at once that it was Paddy Rousseau that had accompanied her daughter into their kitchen, and she couldn't believe her eyes, for the last person she expected to see with her daughter was the likes of Paddy Rousseau, but her eyes were obviously not deceiving her. "Ma'am, this is Paddy Rousseau from next door. He's moved in, as you know, with the Rousseau family. He's Eleanor's cousin," said Carla gingerly, in a very unenthusiastic voice. "I ran into him in the Woodgrove. He walked me back to the farmhouse because we had a bit of a scare. I invited him in for a coffee, if that's all right with you."
"But of course that's all right, darling. Hello, Paddy. Now it's so good to see you. After all these years, what a long time it has been. My word, the rumours are true, I see. You have grown up into an incredibly handsome young man. It makes me aware of how dreadfully old I'm getting when I see you youngsters growing up so fast. It's quite terrifying to realise this." "You're not old, Mrs. Kushner. You're exactly as I remember you at 7. "Well, that's very kind of you to say, Paddy. I can see you're quite the charmer. You can charm me as much as you like. Please don't call me Mrs. Kushner. I don't like being formal. My name is Samantha. Everybody calls me Samantha. I understand from my daughter that you've moved into the Rousseau ranch next door, and that your uncle has taken you under his wing because you want to become a rancher like him. Is that right?" "That's right," said Paddy. "Put it this way. I'm not cut out for a life in a big city. I never did enjoy New York. It has its moments, of course, and I've had fun living there. But I've always fantasized about becoming a rancher. It's all I've ever wanted to do. I realized that when I came here to stay here all those years ago, when I was 7 years old. I knew then, when I came to this ranch, that I wanted to become a rancher." "You did? How extraordinary! Well, I must say, your uncle must be so dreadfully pleased to find that you're both birds of a feather, with similar passions. It's wonderful to have so much in common with each other. And who knows, one day you may be running your uncle's ranch when he retires." "That's exactly what my uncle wants," said Paddy candidly. "We've had long discussions about the matter already, and I do like the idea of one day taking over the ranch from my uncle. But for the time being we're working together as a team, and a formidable one at that. My uncle is teaching me everything I need to know about ranching, and in truth, I can't imagine a better life." "Well, I'm very delighted you've moved in next door, Paddy. Really I am. How about you and Carla take a seat at the breakfast nook while I prepare some coffee for the both of you?" "Sounds cool," said Paddy, reaching down to stroke Thomas the cat, who was rubbing himself affectionately against Paddy's legs, as if he'd known Paddy all his life. "Good Lord," said Samantha, her eyes widening in surprise. "I cannot believe that Thomas likes you this much. He's a very picky cat, you know. He never goes up to strangers. This is a first for him. For some reason he really likes you. And cats are very good judges of character, you know." "Well, I've always been good with animals," Paddy admitted. "When I was living in New York, I worked at the shelter every other week. I did my level best to rehome as many animals as I could." "Well, dare I say, Paddy, you must be a very good person to care about animals as much as you so obviously do. You're obviously going to make an excellent rancher," said Samantha, casting her daughter a look that said, "You see, he is a good person. You got him all wrong. He's not the brat he clearly was at 7.
Before long, Samantha was sitting at the breakfast nook opposite her daughter and Paddy Russo, who were both enjoying thick slices of lemon pound cake, along with mugs of her coffee that had been topped very generously with a frothy milk. Paddy Russo had certainly won Samantha Kushner over in their first few minutes of meeting, for he was a likeable, very chivalrous young man, and if Thomas had warmed to him, he had to be special, because that cat of hers was very discerning. She noticed her daughter was looking flushed, as if Carla was warming to the young man she'd been determined to dislike, and this made Samantha Kushner inwardly smile, because there was something rather gratifying of being able to make her resolutely stubborn daughter finally see some sense. It would be hysterical, she couldn't help but think, if these two ended up together.
"So tell me, how did you manage to run into each other in the woodgrove?"
she asked nonchalantly, trying not to appear too interested, when in reality she didn't know how on earth her daughter had bumped into the very young man she had done her level best to avoid. "Ma'am, I don't want to tell you what happened in the woodgrove, because you're not going to believe a word of it," said Carla. "I mean, I'm struggling to believe it myself, and I'm shaking from the incident, and the only reason I might appear somewhat calm is I keep telling myself that it didn't happen and it wasn't real, but I promise you it did."
"But why would you say I wouldn't believe you, Carla? Of course I would believe you. You've never lied about a thing in your life. You may be many things, but you're not a liar. What happened?"
"Well, ma'am, when I went for a walk in the grove, it was so pretty. I was really beginning to enjoy myself. And then the woods, they just got so weird."
"In what way did they get weird?"
asked Samantha, looking at her daughter through wide, earnest eyes, because what she appeared to be describing sounded exactly what her husband was sharing with her the evening before. "Well, it's very hard to explain, ma'am, but everything in the woods went very quiet. It was cloyingly uncomfortable, very menacious. You couldn't even hear a pin drop. It was spooky and very eerie. It felt as if something was watching me, and whatever was watching me felt evil. And that was when I smelt the stench, mum. It was the smell of death and decay, and it made me want to gag."
"Good Lord," said Samantha. "Why, I do believe your father had a very similar experience to you in the woodgrove yesterday morning, it was. He said as if he felt there was an evil presence in the wood and that something was watching him. But early this morning before breakfast he went into the woods again. He didn't feel the horrible feeling that you're describing now."
"He told you all that?" asked Carla. "Why didn't he tell me any of this?"
"Well, I'm sure he would have if you'd enjoyed dinner with us last night, dear. Then you would have heard all about it, I'm most sure. Your father found one of his steers had gone missing. All the animals were behaving strangely, and it was as if they were scared of something. But your father could not find the missing steer. So he went everywhere looking for it and searched the woodgrove, and that was where he found the steer. How it got there, God only knows. But your father investigated the woods and experienced exactly what you're describing now. He felt as if he was being watched, he said the woodgrove felt menacious, and he was freaked out about the experience, especially when he heard his dead grandmother calling him. I told him his imagination had to be playing tricks on him."
"No, his imagination wasn't playing tricks on him, mum," said Carla. This time it was her eyes that were growing wide with concern. "Dad probably did hear the voice of his late grandmother calling him, only it wasn't his dead grandmother. It was something pretending to be just that. I actually heard Dad calling me in the grove, only it wasn't Dad. It was this odious creature pretending to be Dad, and the very same creature lightly pretended to be Dad's grandmother. This thing knows things. It has supernatural demonic abilities that enable it to impersonate anyone it wants at will. I'm lucky because I saw through its guileful disguise, as one part of its holographic projection was stalling so I could see that this thing wasn't Dad, even though he looked just like Dad. And I knew I was being tricked."
"What are you talking about, love?" said Samantha Kushner, looking completely confounded and rather confused. "Well, Samantha, let me explain," said Paddy, choosing to interject appropriately. "I saw this thing that your daughter, is describing to you. I hasten to tell you she's not making any of this up. I saw it only in its natural form, but I understand from your daughter it has supernatural abilities and is able to pull off a holographic projection of some kind, which he used to entice your daughter by pretending to be your daughter's father. I was in the woods myself only because my uncle's dog was behaving very strangely, and was growling and barking at the woods in such a strange way, and refused to go in there, and he's never behaved like that before. So I knew I needed to investigate at once. I took my hunting rifle with me, and lo and behold, that was when I was witness to seeing this hideously grotesque thing, which really was like something the bowels of hell regurgitated, and I don't exaggerate when I say this.
Good Lord, said Samantha, going white in the face. I don't know what to say. Why would this thing pretend to be your father? And why would it pretend to be your father's late grandmother? What does it want with us? I think it wanted to eat me, Mum. It was drooling over me. You should have seen the spittle that was coming out of its mouth. It was globlets of the stuff. It was disgusting.
Hold on a minute, said Paddy. I'm going to see if I can find anything on the internet that might explain what it was that we both saw. He pulled out his cell phone from his pocket and began scrolling through the information. And then he went quite silent for a brief moment, and the only words that came out of his mouth were, "Good Lord." "What is it?" asked Samantha Kushner, looking at Paddy rather nervously. "Judging by your reaction, Paddy, we're dealing with something quite bad. What is this thing that took on the persona of my husband's late grandmother and tried to pretend to be my daughter's father?" "I think, Samantha, that me and your daughter have just seen a Wendigo. It fits the description perfectly of what we encountered." "But wait a minute," said Samantha, whose lips had curled up in horror at the very suggestion that her daughter might have actually witnessed a Wendigo in their woodgrove. "But isn't that a fictional creature from North American folklore? It's not real, surely." "It seems to me, Samantha," said Paddy, "that this creature is not just a spurious fable from North American folklore as you think, but it exists. And the question is, what are we going to do about it? Because it has not only tried to come after your daughter, but your husband as well. So this thing imposes a threat to all of us." "Well, what do you mean, Paddy? What are we going to do about it? I fail to see what we can do about something like this." "Well, as I was saying to you, the creature is dangerous. It's described in here as a fearsome beast with an insatiable appetite. It stalks humans and devours them, turning them into cannibals. It can shapeshift in order to lure you into its insidious trap, so that it can feast on you. The way I see it, we're all in danger unless we get rid of this hideous thing. You have seen what it is capable of doing." "But I don't see how we can get rid of it," said Samantha. "This thing is supernatural, is it not?" "That's why we have to contact someone who understands about these things and knows what we're dealing with. I can get in touch with a North American shaman to see if he can possibly help us in any way. We've got to find someone that has the ability to remove the Wendigo from the grove. I'm quite sure, Samantha, the steer that ended up in the woodgrove was brought there by the Wendigo itself. It wasn't interested in feasting on the steer. It has no interest in that. But it lightly brought the steer in the woods in order to make your husband go searching for it. It laid out a trap for your husband, so that your husband could potentially walk into it, which was why he pretended to mimic your husband's dead grandfather, to get your husband's attention. Thankfully, your husband was wise enough to be scared away from the woods after he heard the voice of his late grandmother. He probably thought he was losing his mind. The next time the Wendigo might succeed in fooling one of us. So we need to ensure we get rid of it, and we need to contact someone who knows about these things." So there we are. That is the end of part 3 of our story tonight. Part 4 is tomorrow night, and I look forward to you joining me then. Until next time, goodbye and good night.